on this episode of Postcards.
I make things because I want to look at things. What's interesting is that I can't predict what it is that I'm going to want to look at.
Francis A. Johnson rolled the ball from 1950 to 1979. 29 years, 4 hours a day, every day he worked on that precious twine ball.
I think the most powerful thing we can do as people is just like talk to each other. The reality of life is that it is very isolating by nature.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yeakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.
I guess I've been painting for a few decades now. I was in college in the 1990s and moved to California to study graduate school. At that time was really considering painting as a profession and also education. While I was there in California, I met my wife and we moved back to the Midwest. Once we moved to New London, I realized there was opportunities to be able to have studio space and to be able to work in a way that is more difficult in a bigger city where you're having to, find a studio space and have the time to work. So I have my studio in my backyard. So I started making these really large sculptural abstract paintings. Paintings on plywood, paintings on found objects. In 2017, I was awarded a Minnesota State Arts Board grant to create and study this kind of work, and I was able to drive all over Minnesota, the North Shore, southeast, southwest Minnesota, and my region, sort of southwest and central Minnesota, and really look at some of these forgotten buildings. And it's really kind of an indicator also of economy when you think about it, when you look at buildings that are going to be torn down, and there might be like a big blue tarp stretched over that building, and that blue tarp's been sitting there for 3 years and it's faded and it's torn and the wind's been whipping it around. So that's where a lot of this work is coming from, is looking at architecture, looking at faded paint or pieces of buildings that are missing, or maybe there's been a tree that used to sit next to the building and it's been swiping and scraping at the paint, and then they've since then cut the tree down, but the evidence, that trace of that mark is left. When I first was looking at architecture and looking at buildings, there's a route I take crossing Highway 71 in which there's this pole barn, and this was before I was really pursuing this project. And I would look at it and I would see that it had a certain linear quality, it had a pattern, and it had a color situation that I thought was interesting, that I might be able to lift from. So the painting that's directly behind me is from an image in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. We were driving on a kind of scouting trip, and I was looking at buildings, and I had to pull over quickly because I just saw it out of the corner of my eye, and turned around and got to somewhere where I could take photographs of it. And it's just a Morton building. I believe it's a pole shed that the manufacturers might use to display different color swatches of their siding. And so you can get a deal on the pole barn if you let them just use the remnants they have, or show the different colors of siding. So it's got brown and red and blue, like 3 different colors of brown. And I saw these stripes, and it immediately made me think about the painter Ellsworth Kelly, a mid-century painter who I was really fond of. So I've lived in big cities and I've lived in rural areas, and one of the constants as an artist is that you're always looking at your environment. Scattered among these things are going to be situations of architecture that are surprising. What I'm hopeful for is that I have many decades of painting to make. When I look at pole barns or other architecture, rural architecture, it's with an eye of sort of extracting that composition and abstracting it into something that seems like the rules of an abstraction. So there might be external logics that image has, like the proportion of black of a stripe to the other colors. And one of the things that I get anxious about or excited about is that I can't wait to see what I'll make next. I make things because I want to look at things. What's interesting and surprising is that I can't predict what it is that I'm going to want to look at. There might be a certain idea about compositional agent or a conceptual idea about how I should be looking. But I think the basis of it all is that artists want to create something in the world that they're not seeing already.
Almost 8 tons, 17,400 pounds. It was weighed when they moved it into town on the grain scale, so they know the exact weight. 12 feet tall, 40 feet around. Darwin, Minnesota, home of the world's largest ball of twine, made by one man. Francis A. Johnson rolled the ball from 1950 to 1979. 29 years, 4 hours a day. Every day he worked on his precious twine ball. And it was his gift to our community, and we're happy to share it with the world. The local Farmers would collect the twine from their farms and bring it to Francis, and his family also had a farm where they would accumulate the twine, and he would unravel it, square knot it together, spool it up, and then unravel it back on his twine ball. Always took careful measures to make sure it kept its nice spherical shape. He would turn it a quarter turn every so often with a railroad jack. Francis's twine ball held the Guinness Book of World Record for the largest ball of twine in the world for many, many years. He ultimately was surpassed by a twine ball that was worked on by a group, a community actually. Francis's twine ball is still the world's largest ball of twine made by one man, but there is a larger twine ball in Cawker City, Kansas. But an individual named Frank Stober was inspired by Francis to take up his own cause, and I believe in the late 50s or 60s he attempted to surpass Francis's twine ball. It sounded like it was a pretty tight race until Mr. Stober passed away. Francis was able to continue to roll his twine ball for another 7-8 years, I believe. Ultimately, because of his health, he stopped in 1979. He lived into the mid-80s, but the community of Cawker City took up Frank Stober's cause, and they still add twine to that twine ball. But I think the feat of Francis in being the world's largest by one man, 29 years, 4 hours a day, I think that really means something. I think the path you take to get there matters, and the amount of love he showed in his creation and the care for it he took, I think that's what makes it quite a feat.
I seen on television a guy who had a big ball of twine, and I figured, well, maybe someday I'll be on television with my ball of twine.
Some people may question 4 hours a day, every day for 29 years, but I think if your life's work leaves generations in the future, many days of joy and excitement and happiness to be able to see your masterpiece, your life's work, then I think that's a life well spent. I don't know if he would have expected that his twine ball would go on to add so much to a community and leave the legacy it did. Anything that involved doing with your hands, Francis was good at. He was a skilled carpenter and a block layer. And so besides many of his other collections and his twine ball, he would make these pliers out of solid pieces of wood. So he'd take a solid piece of wood and he'd whittle it in such a way that the pliers actually worked, it actually opened. And then in the handle of that pliers, he'd whittle another pliers, and in that handle he'd whittle another pliers, and so on and so forth. So he would whittle these pliers that actually worked, and his largest pliers is this 7-foot pliers that he made from one solid piece of wood, and every one works. When it's all opened, it contains 27 different pliers from 7 feet to 1 inch. And they would say he could sit in front of a TV and just not even think and just whittle these little pliers.
Strange hobby.
Yeah, I guess it'd be fair to say that he was a little bit of an eccentric individual, so. He actually died of emphysema, and he was not a smoker, so the family attributes his ultimate cause of death to 30 years of twine dust. His nephew was ultimately in charge of Francis's estate, and he and his wife and his family were the ones responsible for gifting the twine ball to the Darwin Community Club in the city of Darwin to be stewards over it from that time forward. See, I think the feat of it being one person, 4 hours a day, every day for 29 years, and you look at the size of that, it's, to me, that's pretty impressive, yeah.
I just love that someone thought, oh, I'm going to build a really big ball of twine.
Yeah, we love it too. I'm glad he did think of that. Weird Al in early 1990s had a very famous album where he included a song about a family traveling to the world's largest ball of twine in Minnesota. So we get travelers to the state, and then they'll also add upon their journey, they'll include us, where they find out about us through, the song or social media or whatever way, and they decide Darwin and the Twine Ball is worth their time, and I absolutely agree with them.
On our way to see the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota.
It's fun to welcome the world and to share Darwin community with them. It's a neat opportunity to get to meet so many nice people. So it's always fun working as a volunteer here at the Twine Ball Museum.
Another my painting debut. They showed this at the Metropolitan in Chicago. Is there a Metropolitan in Chicago? There has to be. So that was my first art show.
You're leaving me, 'cause sometimes can't describe what you don't know.
I have been a singer-songwriter since I was 16. I write songs and sing and play guitar. And I've been, doing that for almost a decade now. Oh my God. Yeah.
My blueprint won't fit on your foundation.
I write, it depends, because I really like to push myself, but mostly like folk rock, kind of indie music. I have 3 bandmates. Jessica Anderson plays the drums, Jimmy Osterholt plays the bass, and Kelly Blau plays the guitar in my band. For my stuff, I come in with a full song, full lyrics, full everything, and then I have everybody kind of build around it. Because I picked each of them because I liked how they played. So I obviously wanted their influence in what I do. I came out with a record. It was a Kickstarter-backed album. The record is called Of Unsound Mind. It is kind of about mental health stuff, terrible relationships, loneliness, recovery, things like that. Just like whatever was heavy on my mind, I wrote about. On the cover of the album, so this used to live in our garage, and it was like up in the highest corner, and it really freaked me out. And then one day, I just had a vision, and I told my dad he needed to take it down because I wanted to use it for the cover of the record. So he took it down, and then I put it in the backyard in the grass and took a picture. So it became the cover of our record. Here he is. I have not named him. I don't think he has a name. Really good looking guy. So that's all the information I have on that particular part of my life. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was like 18. I was living in a funeral home and I was working there and drinking really heavily. And there was just one day I woke up and I knew that I was probably gonna kill myself. And that was like the vibe of the day, was that I was pretty sure that was gonna happen that day. And I ended up calling my mom. And it's so funny the way like those kind of things work, where you just kind of wake up and you're like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do today. Like, your brain is so, while it can remind you that you are thirsty or hungry, it's also like, dude, let me talk to you. We gotta die today. You know, it's like it's really freaky. And I remember I called my mom and I was sobbing and I was just like, I'm really freaked out. I think I gotta go to the hospital because that's what you do, right? And yeah, that's what you do. So she brought me. And then I ended up doing like an outpatient program. I was inpatient for a few days, but I would not tell them how often I drank or anything, or I just like blatantly lied. I was like, no, I'm just very depressed. I ended up getting on antidepressants there, and then I did outpatient for 3 months, and it was every day. Dropped out of college and just did that. Then I moved home, and then I moved out, and then I just kept going back and forth because I could never make anything work for a long time. And then this last January, I went to the hospital again, and then I went to treatment after I had gone to the hospital. So I've just been battling with mental health and substance abuse more of my life than I have been having that under control and been in recovery.
I'm 8 years older than her, bro.
What can I say?
What can I say?
What can I say?
Wait, you gotta show them that. Georgette the other night came into my...
Growing up was pretty consistently entertaining. I was homeschooled until 3rd grade, and then when we were homeschooled, it was just kind of like do whatever you want to do, learn about whatever you want to learn about. But my childhood was just very fun and creative and hilarious. Here's me softly touching my sister, just reminding her that I'm there. Just there for her at any and all times. Just a soft touch. What a nice way to remind someone. I grew up around my dad painting all the time, and a lot of really loud music. We would just have nights where we would blast music and hang out and write and draw, and yeah, it was just like constant creativity.
I didn't learn anything new. Oh, what you do to me.
I think the most powerful thing we can do as people is just like talk to each other and find ways to feel less alone. Because like we were just talking about, it only gets worse, you know, like the reality of life is that while it is like beautiful, beautiful moments, it is very isolating by nature, I think, especially in like the capitalistic Western kind of work life. So I think that's kind of why I want to be an artist or a musician, is just to feel connected to other people again in some small way, even if that's just them listening to a song and finding one lyric that they resonate with. That is sick if that happens, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
All the world weary, or the sleepy, or the angry, can't shake me no more still. I feel them come.
Oh, this is a good one too. Look at that. God. Who knew I'd grew up? Forget it. Forget it. Had a stroke. I love dragons. That's that on that. Glamour shots. This is before I got braces, which I may need again soon because I'm starting to look like a horse girl. And there's that.
Postcards is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Additional support provided by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien on behalf of Shalom Hill Farms, a retreat and conference center in a prairie setting near Windham, Minnesota. On the web at shalomhillfarm.org. Alexandria, Minnesota, a year-round destination with hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for memorable vacations and events. More information at explorealex.com. The Lake Region Arts Council's Arts Calendar, an arts and cultural heritage funded digital calendar showcasing upcoming art events and opportunities for artists in West Central Minnesota. On the web at lrac4calendar.org. Playing today's new music plus your favorite hits, 96.7 Cram. Online at 967cram.com.